Hi everybody, welcome to our second day of talking about weather. Today we are going to be focusing on the first part of our standard, which is air masses. Again, you can write these down in your notebook just like we did in class, or you can just watch the video and just pause anytime you need. So first, what is an air mass? So an air mass is just a huge body of air in the lower atmosphere, and this is classified by temperature and by humidity. So humidity is how much water is in the air. If you think of a really humid day, you might feel like kind of sticky, like there's a lot of like water vapor in the air. You get really sweaty really quick. So that's what, when we're talking about humidity, is just how much water vapor is in the air. So take a look at this graphic and pause the video and see if you notice any trends. So see if you can figure out any patterns that you see looking at this graphic. Pause the video and see how many you can find. Okay, so something that you might have noticed that anytime the bubbles are over the water, it has this word maritime in it, and it has an M. Anytime that we have bubbles that are originating from over the continent, you can see we have our continental air masses. So that's a trend that you might have noticed. Something else you might have noticed at that all of these originating from the north have the word polar in it, versus all of these originating from the south have the word tropical in it. So let's take a look. That's basically the kind of general overview of air masses. If they originate from the north, or if you're in the southern hemisphere from the south, these are going to be polar air masses. Think like polar bears, they live in cold areas or polar climates. That's going to be cold. In comparison, if you have air masses originating from the equator, those are going to be tropical air masses. Think if you go on a tropical vacation, you're going somewhere warm. If there's an air mass that is originating over a continent, so here you can see it's originating over Canada, that is going to be called a continental air mass. Same thing if it's originating over Mexico, it is still a continental air mass. In comparison, if the air mass originates from over water, that's a maritime air mass. And whether it's water over west or east, it's still maritime. Think like marine. So if you are in a marine ecosystem, that's going to be like a water ecosystem. So in order to tell what an air mass is, both temperature and how much humidity it has, you just put two of these words together. So for example, this air mass would be a polar continental air mass. It is cold and it is dry because it formed over the continent where there's less water. In comparison, this would be a tropical continental air mass. It is a warm, dry air mass. So you always describe it both by temperature and by humidity. Next, we have maritime. So this one, it's originating in the polar region, so it's a polar maritime air mass. It is a cold, wet air mass, humid air mass, versus this would be a tropical maritime air mass. So in summary, here we have, our tropical is warm, formed over the tropics. Polar, it's cold, high air pressure. And we'll talk more about air pressure tomorrow. Maritime, this forms over oceans and is humid, and continental forms over land and is dry. So, number one, first you need to figure out, is it warm or cold? And then you say, is it humid or dry? So, maritime, tropical. I would describe this maritime. Well, that describes a humid air mass. Tropical would be warm. Right now, pause the video, see if you can do 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so hopefully for continental polar, you said continental, well, it forms over continents, so that's dry. And polar is cold. Polar bears live in cold areas, so that is dry and cold. Maritime polar, that would be our humid air mass and cold. Continental tropical would be our dry and warm air mass. That's it for our mini lesson today. Continue with the activities.